The meeting is live.
We're calling to order the Williamsport City Council meeting of Thursday, July 23rd, 2020, a little bit past 6:30 p.m. We're meeting remotely again in Williamsport, PA. First on the agenda, item 1 is approval of City Council minutes dated July 9th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions or corrections from council tonight? Hearing or seeing none. Mrs. Franklin, motion please.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Liz,
Yes.
Mrs. Cat,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
yes,
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to item 2, limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests for that tonight. I'm going to move item 4 up next on the agenda. We're just going to flip that ahead of 3, which is the resolution on the RACP grant for the Pajama Factory. Mrs. Frank, would you read that in short form, please?
A resolution of the City of Williamsport authorizing the submission of an application for funding to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program, granting the amount of $2 million for the Pajama Factory Williamsport Improvement Project.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion and a second from council?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Pavlik, you have the floor.
Good evening. Before you is a resolution to authorize the submission of a RACP grant application to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for a construction project at the Pajama Factory. In 2019, the Pajama Factory submitted an RACP application and received an award letter for a $2 million RACP grant. To complete the next step, the city needs to approve this resolution and attached cooperation agreement as part of the full application to release the funds by the Commonwealth. Because the Pajama Factory is only eligible to participate in the program as a sub-grantee, they need a sponsor or a grantee, which is a government agency, to participate with them. So with that, we need to enter into this resolution on behalf of the Pajama Factory to submit the application, along with approving the attached cooperation agreement to determine the terms that both parties will have during the whole RACP process. The cooperation agreement identifies key components as to who is responsible for what, and also identifies the project that will be completed up there. The cooperation agreement you have identifies the project as parking in accordance with the approved stormwater plan, roof work, and a high efficiency heating and air conditioning unit for the building. In addition, it identifies who's responsible for the matching funds, reimbursement of ineligible expenditures, bridge financing, the grant administration, and all the state's compliance obligations, which most of those do fall onto the Pajama Factory. Earlier this week, I forwarded to council various tabs from the RACP application for your review. I felt that they provided some good information for council as to what the project entails and details about the property, the economic impact, and other items. In attendance tonight, we have Mark Winkleman of the Pajama Factory and Sid First, their consultant, the Pajama Factory's consultant for the project. This resolution and cooperation agreement were reviewed by the Finance Committee on Tuesday.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Ms. Mealy, Finance.
Hi, Randy, thank you. Yes, this item was reviewed by Finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. We did discuss some of the elements of the agreement. for one thing, the $2 million price tag on the redevelopment and capital assistance project funding is the totality of the project. It needs to be matched by a 50. There's a 50% match requirement, so it needs to be matched by $2 million from the developer. But the developer is using the value of the property, which is valued at $5 million as the match for the project. So the totality of the project, which is extensive, is roof work at the pajama factory, potentially including green roof work, as well as the parking area and HVAC and heating in the in one of the buildings. Building 7, I believe, was what Mr. Winkleman said. The building that lies along Memorial Avenue there. The total pajama factory complex is something like 300,000 square feet. Building 7 is about 20% of it. So a substantial amount of the structure. Clearly, this is a really impressive project that Mr. Winkleman has been sort of chipping away at for, I think, a little better than a decade now. If I'm right, it seems to me that he owned it before you and I were elected to council, Randy. It's an absolutely gorgeous building. We're fortunate that that Mr. Winkleman and his group have been willing to step up and try to bring the building back into useful life, and have been successful doing that. As far as the finance committee was concerned, most of our questions really centered around two things. We were congratulating the developer on getting this funding that will allow him to make infrastructure improvements to the building that don't necessarily generate rent dollars, without needing to invest his own money, and that will go a long way to making the whole project affordable for him. But the other concern of the finance committee, obviously, aside from congratulating Mr. Winkleman, is to make certain that the city, as the pass-through organization, is protected from any sort of financial damages related to passing this money through. As we all know, the reporting requirements for redevelopment and capital assistance funding are pretty onerous. The city has administered a handful of grants, a handful of our own grants, and it takes a lot of time and effort. For this grant, Mr. Winkleman will be utilizing the services of Penn Strategies, one of the city's current consultants, to administer the grant. So both Mr. Winkleman and obviously the consultant are well aware of the reporting requirements and the restrictions, including prevailing wage, on this funding. We have also, Mr. Winkleman will have to have bridge financing for the project because the RACP grant works as a reimbursement style grant. So Mr. Winkleman will have to expend the funds, get the expenditures approved by the state, and then be reimbursed. So he has a line of credit for the that will allow him to flex out funding and then be reimbursed. And that will, to a certain extent, protect the city's financial interest in the off chance that some amount of money were to be expended that wasn't reimbursable. But we have also built in, and thanks very much to Mr. Pavlok for his hard work and thought that went into this cooperation agreement. We have also built in a $250,000 bond, just in case there were to be any unreimbursable costs that somehow the city were to be partly on the hook for, anything like that. Once again, we're acting only as a pass through. The money goes from us directly to Mr. Winkleman. But there's still a possibility for us to get caught up in the nuts and bolts of the thing. So that additional bond will help protect our interest just in case anything were to happen with the grant. But once again, Mr. Winkleman has done an excellent job so far in the pajama factory. And Penn Strategies has some experience with administering redevelopment and capital assistance funding. So we anticipate this project to go smoothly. It's simply the job of the finance committee and the finance department, obviously, to make certain that the city's best interests are represented and are taken care of before we agree to act as a pass-through for an organization. Mr. Pavlok, remind me, we have been a pass-through for one other organization, we thought?
Two.
RACP funding?
Two, currently we have Lycoming College for their Gateway project, and early 2000s, there was Hope Enterprises for the acquisition of their current property up on Reach Road.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about Hope, but yes, so we have done this twice in the past, and both of those projects have worked out or are working out well for us, Randy. So we have high hopes for this one as well. And as I said, the Finance Committee forwarded this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liz. Ms. Mealy. Are there other members of the Finance Committee that want to chime in, or anybody on council have questions? And welcome, Mr. First and Mr. Winkleman.
Thank you.
Glad to have both you gentlemen here tonight. And if there's any questions, you're here to answer them. And if not, we'll be glad to hear whatever comments you have.
It's hard to hear you, Randy.
Let me get a little closer here. Is that any better?
Yes.
I just opened it up to the floor. If anybody's got any questions, that were on the Finance Committee or from other members of council, and if not, I'll open it up to Mr. Winkleman and Mr. First, if they'd care to make any comments.
Well,
Mr. Winkleman, you want to
yeah, I should just thank everybody for helping this project move along. It's yeah, it's been a big deal, but this is really important, and I hate to be doing it right now in the middle of the pandemic, but I don't know, maybe there's never a good time. So here we go.
Thanks, Mark. Full disclosure, and I'm glad Mr. White's back. Let me go to him first. Mr. White, I have a connection to the pajama factory through my wife. She has a small business space rented there. So I'm thinking I should probably abstain on this vote.
I think that, yeah, I mean, you can abstain. I don't know that that's a per se conflict, but to be safe,
Okay.
it would make sense to abstain.
All right, I admit I'm biased. So, Mr. Yoder,
Since we're talking about conflicts, just for the record, I'll be abstaining also. My employer is helping out on the back end with this project, so.
but other than that, I'd just like to thank. Well, I've been in different meetings. We've had meetings together to talk these things over. I've been with the administration, with Mr. Winkleman, with Penn Strategies. This has been a long ongoing process. And first of all, I want to thank Joe Pavlak, did an incredible job pulling things together that we needed to have pulled together. He became the point man and did an excellent job. I think he protected the interests of the city while accommodating the needs of the pajama factory. And that's not always an easy tightrope to walk, but he made it look easy because he's good at what he does. So I think we came out pretty well all the way around. And so thanks, Joe, for that. And Mr. First, you did a great job as well representing the Penn Strategy side and making sure all the T's were crossed, the I's were dotted. It's not an easy task taking care of one of these grants. We've seen up close the responsibility it puts on the city when we've been the one upgrading it for someone else. There's a lot that goes into it. And it's a long drawn out process. So we appreciate that and appreciate Mr. Winkleman for, there wouldn't be a pajama factory if you hadn't made an investment and stepped forward with, really when you stepped out, it was a unique concept, I'd say, for North Central PA to have the kind of atmosphere that the pajama factory affords us, but it's made our community richer, I think, and provided something that we didn't have in a concentrated area like that. And I think it's going to benefit the health of our city and the future of our city going forward. It certainly hasn't come close to reaching its potential, but the idea is to reach critical mass first, and then you can move beyond that and expand. I think you're right there right now. So I'm excited about the future. I'm assuming 2 abstentions, but I'm assuming there's 4 votes here tonight at least. So I'm confident we can leave tonight with a good future ahead of us in that neck of the woods. And that we've talked about this before too. The more successful the pajama factory is, we're hoping it's going to help the neighborhoods around there and everything else that goes with it. Mr. Banks, you have your hand up.
I do. I will not be abstaining. I'll put that out right now.
Thank you.
No, this is an example of positive development. We have this other project, this Dollar General going in. That's an example of something that could detract from a neighborhood. But Mr. Winkleman, I'm thanking you for coming here and putting something good in that could add to the neighborhood and have like Mr. Allison was saying, a bleed over effect into a positive bleed over effect in the rest of the neighborhood. It's in dire need of redevelopment. So we're thankful that you're willing to put your neck on the line for that over the last 10 years. And we're happy to have you here tonight.
Very good.
One other, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the mayor and the codes and the zoning department were intricately involved in this as well. And it's representing the interests of the city, but encouraging economic development. It's a balancing act, but that was another part of the administration that was intricately involved going along. So thank you for that, Mayor Slaughter. Mrs. Katz. I think you're still muted.
Yep.
Bonnie.
Yep. I think, people should understand the blood, sweat, and tears, Mark, that you put into that building over the years. I don't know how many ulcers you have, but to bring that building to where it is, it's like any other old building. You pull down one wall and you find other things that have to be done. And it's a constant chore and a constant job. And I don't think the public is aware of how much work you have put in there. At this point, I think somebody said you have like 100 tenants in there at this point.
135.
How many?
135.
135. And when you stop and think about that, that's a lot of space, a lot of work that's been done for the citizens and people of that area. And to think that we have a building that has sustained 10 years, like I said, with your blood, sweat, and tears, is absolutely remarkable. Penn Strategies, very thankful that they've come forward to take on the RACB grant. It just is, it's a difficult and long process. And as everybody said, Joe Pavlak put his blood, sweat, and tears into this also to get this accomplished. But, to have that building, the Pajama Factory, to think the name came from a movie and it's still in existence. And I think we're all just very proud of the fact that that's still there, and we can say, that it's existed this long. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been a great project. A lot of fun for me.
Does anyone
work.
remember does anyone remember who the actor and actress were in the Pajama Game movie?
Wasn't it Doris Day?
That's the woman,
Yeah, I don't remember.
Rock Hudson.
Rock Hudson.
Can you see that? I've
Oh my
I
God,
saw
there
it,
it
but
is. There it is.
Oh, frankly, Mark, you should screen that once a year at the PJ Factory.
Oh, I know.
oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I would not mind seeing it. It's got a pretty good soundtrack.
Well, the soundtrack
Exactly.
isn't bad, but the movie moves so slowly because they don't have cuts like the new movies.
We performed, we staged the musical when I was in high school.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh,
Unfortunately, I was a bit part, so I don't really know most of the plot. But
You know, I don't think a lot of the new people, citizens of our community, realize that that's why it's named after that, because the movie was made there.
mhm.
yeah, interesting. Anyway, I wouldn't mind seeing it. I never have. So, congratulations all. And thanks.
There's a little piece of history in my family there. It was Weldon's Manufacturing
Exactly. Yeah.
was the business there, and one of the owners was an uncle of mine, who was on my maternal side. My aunt's was married to him, so we have some neat pictures from back then. But
What was his name, Randy?
Joe Smith.
Oh,
Joe Smith. Huh.
Oh, he's going for the files. So, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll have the vote then, Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Yoder,
Abstain.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes,
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Sorry, Janice. Yes.
Mr. Allison,
Abstain. Motion passes 5 yes votes and 2 abstentions. Thank you, Mrs. Frank, and thank you, everybody again, who's been really involved in this.
thank you. Yeah, this is the book. I'm going to find it for you, Randy. I think Smith is in there.
Okay,
It was a management book
I'd like to see that.
project here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Are we all set? Anything else?
Nope, now starts the hard stuff.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move back up to item 3.
I'm sorry, but are you guys all hearing that too?
Yes, it sounds like there's a horse running around. Or something in that nature. There it goes. Item 3, the 6-year capital budget project. Would you read that in short form? And this is the final reading of this ordinance. Please, Mrs. Frank.
an ordinance adopting a 6-year capital projects budgets for the city of Williamsport for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2021 to June 30th, 2026, final reading.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion and a second from council?
So So moved. moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Mr. Pavlak again.
This is the 6-year capital budget for fiscal years ending 2021 through 2026. We discussed the budget at the previous council meeting, and I think that there was discussion on most parts. The Finance Committee had only gotten partway through. So at the meeting on Tuesday, we discussed additional items further going into tonight's meeting. In discussions with the mayor earlier today, he's had discussions with Chief Hagan, and one of the items in the Public Safety Bureau of Police grouping, the administration at this point is going to request that council make a motion to remove. At this point, it's something that we want to look towards in the future, but being that it's in one of the early years, we feel right now it's just easier to remove it from the budget, and that would be the Bearcat tactical vehicle. With that, I don't know if you want me to go into any further discussions on line items or just address questions.
I'll just add to that, that I know there's discussion around that at Tuesday's Finance Committee, and that, as Mr. Pavlak said, I would support if council so chooses to make a motion to remove that item.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Slaughter. Ms. Mealy, this was reviewed in finance.
This was reviewed in finance, Randy, at our last council meeting and also at our finance meeting. We really only delved into the first 2 pages of the capital budget. In finance, it was related to time constraints. In the council meeting, I'm not certain that we really felt it was necessary to read out all 4 pages, but anyway, we went back at our finance meeting this past week and reviewed the other 2 pages, the police and fire, the public safety tab, as well as the general government tab. And I in particular, I'm always the noisy one, had a couple of questions about general government and RVT. But then the one thing that seems to have caught the attention of the Sun Gazette today, from what I understand, were some questions that I asked about the Bearcat tactical vehicle that's built into the capital projects budget for under the police tab. The item was actually in the capital budget last year, and I believe we'd asked some questions about it last year, but the spending got deferred. And as we all know, that does often happen one way or the other. I don't think just because it's in the capital budget for next year, we're necessarily likely to invest in a Bearcat either. But at the finance meeting, I did try to make clear my position on it, which is that if that is an acquisition that the city is interested in making, I would not be comfortable with us using bank financing to cover that expenditure. We would need to find some sort of grant funding or some sort of or partner with other municipalities or the county to make that investment a reality. That said, if the administration would like to see it removed or moved down a couple of years in the capital projects budget, I would certainly support that. I think that next year in particular is looking to be a difficult year for the city financially, and we don't know how long the impact of COVID-19 will extend out for us, what damage it will do to businesses in the city, which in turn will reduce our revenues, what damage it will do to homeowners, which may reduce our property tax income. And so clearly it's not an expenditure we'll be in a position to make over the next couple of years anyway. I don't know if the administration wants the Bearcat removed entirely, in which case we could certainly do that, and it could always reappear in a couple of years if we decided it was something we were interested in, or if we simply want to move it down to maybe 2023. But I'm happy to make the motion if I can get any guidance on that.
You can remove it entirely at this point, Councilwoman Mealy.
Okay, sure, then.
So what's changed since this was submitted? I mean, is this not a priority anymore? Or is it simply just we're not comfortable over the next couple of years? I mean, if it's something that we see that we may need in the next 5 years, I don't know that it's necessary we remove it. So, I mean, is there any clarity you want to provide, Derek?
I mean, as with every department, it's just a list of possibilities over the next 5 years. So at this point, it can be removed. Now, over the next, couple years, if it's something that comes back around, it could always be added back in. But at this point, as Ms. Mealy said, if it's to explore grants or other counties, but as she also noted, the impact from COVID, who knows, how long that's going to go out for. So at this point, my opinion, I think it's fine to just remove it.
Other questions or comments from other council members on this particular motion to amend the capital budget? Was there a second on this?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to amend. And was your motion to remove completely, Ms. Mealy?
Sorry, Randy. I was just going to say, did I actually make a motion?
Oh, I guess you didn't. I'm sorry. Yes, you said motion. Yeah, you
well,
talked.
Dave seconded it already, so I'm just going to go for it. What else should we take out while we're at it? No, my motion upon concurring with the administration or conferring with the administration is to, at this point, remove the line for the Bearcat tactical vehicle from the capital budget. And of course, we would not be sad to see it reappear, perhaps with a different funding strategy at some point in the future. So I'll make that motion. Dave, you still willing to second that?
Second.
Other comments or questions about the motion to remove it completely from the capital budget? I agree. I think it's a good idea to take it out. I'm not that familiar with the equipment, but I'm not sure that we would ever need something like that. But Mr. Pelizzi.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Yeah, I just wanted to add, before COVID ever started, I had looked into some programs for the city, specifically for our police department, to try and acquire one of these vehicles through a government program. As much as I think our CERT team needs one of these vehicles for the safety and well-being of our officers, our CERT team serves 8 different counties within our immediate area. I think that we really need one. However, I agree with you and some other members of council that I think due to COVID right now, it doesn't seem that we're going to be able to acquire one through any kind of a government program. With that being said, I just wanted to state that I think that moving forward with us trying to acquire one, we certainly should have the help of some of our surrounding counties and municipalities and those to which our CERT team is going to serve.
Good point, Mr. Pelizzi. Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, could we have the vote on the motion to remove the Bearcat from the capital budget, please, Mrs. Frank?
Mr. Yoder,
No.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelizzi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. So we moved on that. Now we're back to the capital budget. Would council like to review the things that we haven't reviewed on here yet? Is there a consensus on that either way? I haven't reviewed as far as publicly. I'm sure we've all read through it, but.
I guess the question to me, Randy, would be much more because we have covered it in finance and all of council has had a look at it. Do we feel like that's the sort of information that should be read out publicly just for kind of the matter of the record, or is that not something? We always have traditionally gone over it in council chambers, put it up on the wall, put it on camera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the way that meetings are functioning right now. But if we feel that it needs to be read into the record somehow, then now's the time that we could do that if we wanted to.
I mean, is this a document we could have linked to the website for citizens to look at?
Yes.
I think that we do.
I mean, that seems to me would be sufficient.
It will be
I will
posted
agree with
tomorrow.
that. Put it on the website and that would be sufficient.
The future of
it's
her
also-
debating legislation documents, what have you, I believe that we can share them through this platform. FYI for everyone.
I was just thinking that, Adam. And that might be a wise idea if we continue on this platform for any length of time, that we try and put things like that up on screen.
We can do that.
And if we have the ability, we should definitely do that then.
I think probably what we should have, Mr. Allison, is a discussion about what merits that level of
Right.
transparency and what doesn't. Most resolutions, I don't think necessarily are that would be necessary for, but
No. But there are items, as you pointed out, traditionally, we have been able to do that on a capital budget or other items, so.
Chris, have we ever put it up on the website before?
Not the capital budget. Our operating budget's on there, but not the capital. But I have it in electronic form that's easy enough to put on there.
I believe what Ms. Mealy is referencing is normally when we do it in council chambers, I have a device that plugs between the laptop and the projector, and it
Right.
captures it and puts it on TV.
So I think the issue here is that the public at the end of the meeting couldn't comment on something that happened during the meeting if they hadn't been able to see the document.
Right.
So, Mr. Cooley, is that something that we can put up now?
Yeah.
I just sent it to you, Chris.
Yep, I can do that right now.
I think it's page 12 of that document, Chris.
Are we putting it online or are we putting it on the screen? What would you like to do? I can do both.
Yep. Why don't we do both?
Okay. If you want to start, I'll start putting it on the screen here. Just give me a minute.
So am I going to be reading like I did last week, the remaining pages? Is that what we're
Yes.
doing?
Why don't we do that, Mr. Pavlak?
Sure. On page 3 of the proposed capital projects, I believe it's the second tab in your budget book. Under Public Safety Bureau Police, I'll continue on going through the first 2 years as those tend to be priorities for the administration. So under the Bureau of Police cars in year 1, 190,000, and year 2, 145,000. That plans for a 4-vehicle, 3-vehicle purchase, alternating year to year. Video surveillance camera, $10,000 for each year. to add additional cameras or provide maintenance on the current system. Firearms, 27,000 in year one, 30,000 in year two. The 27,000 represents pistols, which were pushed back from the current year. Long-term evidence storage facility is $100,000 each year. The next item was removed. The portable police radios is looking to replace all the mobile radios in the police department. And then in year two, $15 million for a public safety building, for a total in year one of $502,000 and a total in year two of $15,460,000. Under the Bureau of Codes in year two, $40,000 for vehicle replacements, for a total in year two of $40,000. No funds have been requested in year one. Under the Bureau of Fire, in years one and two, $275,000 for a new pumper. For support vehicles, $39,000 in year one and $42,000 in year two. Under facility improvements for all stations, there's $10,000 in each year for general maintenance of all all fire department facilities. Facility improvements for headquarters, $50,000 for maintenance and upgrades in each of the 2 years. For breathing apparatus, they're planning 2 unit replacements per year for $20,000 in years 1 and 2. For computer software upgrades, $5,000 for each of the years. Under fire hydrants and laterals, that's $5,000 each year for general maintenance. And a new line item added this year for personal protective equipment for $30,000 each year. It's a plan that the department has to replace turnout gear after a 10-year service life, which is the recommended life for that gear. That brings a total for the fire department of $434,000 in year one and $437,000 in year two, and a total public safety budget of $936,000 in year one and $15,937,000 in year two.
Questions, Council? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, on the fourth and final page under general government, support equipment, $50,000 in years 1 and 2. This is various equipment upgrades for all departments for copiers, computers, and miscellaneous items. Finance MIS upgrade, $45,000 in year 1 and $10,000 in the remaining years for upgrading the finance software, HR software, and continued maintenance. Council packet digitization, $14,000 in year 1, $5,000 in year 2. Building access control systems, $15,000 in each of the years for various upgrades, card readers and camera securities. City Hall server upgrade, that's under a 5-year replacement program with $60,000 in year 2. The renewal backup application support agreement is $3,700 in year 1 and $13,000 in year 2. And then the next 3 lines involve City Hall renovations, moving expenses, or acquisition expenses, depending on the direction that the ad hoc committee determines is the best option and whatever council would ultimately approve. For renovations, $500,000 in year 1, $400,000 in year 2. Moving expenses, $500,000 in year 1, or acquisition expense for $500,000 in year 1. Again, those are fluid numbers. We just need to determine which option we potentially will move with. That brings a total general government budget in year 1 of $1,627,700, and year 2, $553,000. Under transportation support vehicles, $150,000 in year 1, $125,000 in year 2. Under garage and CNG improvements, $1.5 million in year 1. The plan is for building out a building for to house buses and support vehicles and other office and facility maintenance needs. Fixed route vehicles, which are buses, $1,920,000 in year 1 and $2 million $2 million in year 2. Other transit vehicles, $131,000 in year 1. Under support equipment, $100,000 each year. Spare components, which are capital bus parts, $100,000 in year 1, $75,000 in year 2. Under streetscape, they have $500,000 proposed for the first 3 years. And then the Trade and Transit Center complex, $1,500,000 in year 1, which could include possible renovations to the Trade and Transit Center to obtain a new tenant in the currently unoccupied space. So total transportation in year 1, $5,901,000, and year 2, $3,300,000. That brings the total capital projects budgets in year 1 to $18,504,700, and in year 2, $25,265,000, and a total 6-year budget of $79,169,172.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Any questions or comments from council?
Mr. Allison, if I could just chime in really quickly to
Certainly.
say, pardon me?
Yeah,
Okay. Really quickly to say that I did not mention that the other item that we discussed a bit during the finance committee was the funding for digitizing council packets. And the discussion therein more or less revolved around the fact that it might have been there was no time to do it, but it might have been handy to have that system in place before the COVID pandemic.
yes.
And consequently that it might behoove us to try and make that happen at some point relatively soon, and at least develop a system that makes the organization and assembly of the packets simpler. Even if we don't necessarily go the route this year of purchasing mobile workstations, it's possible that we could find a mechanism that would allow anyone to access it from any computer, basically. I said that that technology, I'm old enough that technology is not really my specialty, but there are a handful of people just a bit younger than I am on council, or perhaps a lot younger, Mr. Yoder, who are much better versed in that than I am. And it's something that we should probably try to work on putting together when we all have time. Okay.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's nice what we have so far, but it is a little cumbersome to work with at times, and to a lot of extra organization that has to go into it that we could alleviate with the kind of technology we want to get to. Other comments or questions from council? And that gets us through what we needed to look at. We've shared as much as we could with the public tonight and have a plan for moving forward. And it is going to be, the entire budget and commentary is going to be on the website for citizens to peruse at their leisure.
It's posted right now on the website.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Cooley.
Absolutely.
So are we ready to vote on the final reading of the capital budget? I think we are. Mrs. Frank, on the capital budget, please, for the final reading. Mrs. Frank, you're muted if you're calling the roll.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Pavlak, and thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move down to item 5. Resolution to approve the state historic preservation grant contract, rather. Mrs. Frank, would you read that in short form, please?
Resolution to approve a state historic preservation office certified local government master contract between the city of Williamsport and Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission.
Is there a motion and a second from council?
So moved.
Second.
There's the motion and a second. Thank you, council, and welcome tonight, Mrs.
Good
Young.
evening. Good evening. The city is a certified local government, or a CLG, which makes us eligible to apply for grants and scholarships for projects and training programs related to historic preservation. The State Historic Preservation Office is requesting that all CLGs execute a master contract that will help to streamline the process for any future grants. Execution of the master contract is also a requirement for the next resolution, which allows the city to apply for scholarship training funds. The master contract extends through December 31, 2024, and this contract was reviewed by the city's solicitor and also by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Ms. Mealy, reviewed in finance?
Yes, this item was reviewed in finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. Honestly, Randy, there was very little discussion aside from that. If this streamlines a somewhat paperwork intensive process, I think it's a benefit to all of us.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Mr. Slaughter?
I just wanted to add briefly here that this is Ms. Young's final council meeting. I believe she's going to be leaving us at the end of next week. So I just wanted to thank her. Actually, she was supposed to originally plan to be leaving in March timeframe. And we pleaded with her to stay through COVID, well, at least through a portion of it. And she gratefully did that. So I just wanted to thank her and all her work. You know, she got the COVID small business loan up and running along with Mr. Pavlak. And so anyways, I just wanted to thank her. I know this is not the ideal way necessarily her final council meeting to send her off. But nonetheless, I did want to still thank her and acknowledge that this is the final one in her long career serving the city. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. We probably don't have a lot of comments about the resolution itself, I wouldn't imagine. But we do have a lot of comments about Mrs. Young and her.
Uh-oh.
Why don't we, there's another resolution that Mrs. Young is going to address. And why don't we get through that and then we can say the things we want to say. Well, or would rather we didn't have to say. I was hoping maybe we could commandeer a vote tonight to keep her here for at least till I'm off council, but.
Can I second that?
On this particular item, are there any comments or questions from council? Hearing or seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mack,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Let's move to item 6. And would you read that in short form, please, Mrs. Frank?
Resolution to approve submission of a certified local government educational scholarship application for Forum 2020 at home.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion and a second from council?
So move.
Move. Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mrs. Young, on this particular.
Yes, this resolution allows us to submit a certified local government scholarship application to the State Historic Preservation Office for the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Forum, a series of over 20 live educational sessions on a variety of preservation topics. As a CLG, HARB members are required to have at least 4 hours of training per year. Participation in this forum will meet the 2020 training requirement. The scholarship offer is also open to code staff, planning commission members, and elected officials. The registration cost is $100 per person. The city is responsible for registering and paying for the individual and attendees. The SHPO scholarship funds will then reimburse the city for the full cost of the registration. Upon approval of this resolution, the scholarship request form will then be submitted to SHPO. And this was reviewed by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Ms. Mealy.
Yep, there may be two voices in this. I've got kind of a fussy baby here, Randy. So if you guys hear anything chiming in, know that it's not me wailing on this end of the line. Yes, this was reviewed by Finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. And also a recommendation, Ms. Ruzinski asked that who is also retiring shortly, asked that any members of council who might be interested in attending the online forum let her know by tomorrow morning so that she can so that she can register all of us for the forum if we'd like to. And I think it would be the recommendation of at least this member of the Finance Committee that any member of council who might be interested consider registering. The materials look interesting. But the materials should be interesting, and it's a pretty rare occurrence that we're able to access this kind of information or this kind of a forum online. Traditionally, as we all know, it would be held in person, and you'd have to go to some other city to attend. So to be able to attend these sort of webinars from here in Williamsport is fortunate for us, and the material should be fascinating. That said, as I said, it's kind of a no-brainer. If we can get reimbursed for it, that would be terrific. So we forwarded this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Comments or questions from council members? Okay. Mrs. Frank will have the vote on this item, this motion rather.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Paluzzi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Mrs. Young, we could probably sit here and talk for an hour about all you've meant to this city over the years, especially those of us who have had the pleasure of working with you. With Liz and I, we're in our 11th year, and you were here before that, long before that. And one of those people that does a lot of important work behind the scenes. You're not the kind of person that is striving to be out front or wants the recognition, but you do deserve it because you've been a great resource for this city, a great asset for this city. And we've lost a lot of institutional knowledge and expertise over the last few years. And you can't make that up overnight. You can hire new people and move ahead, but you cannot replace that kind of experience. And we're the poorer for it, but we definitely, at least I'm sure I can speak for all of us, and probably for most of the people in the city that know you, we'll be the poorer for it, but we're the richer for having known you and having had the opportunity to work with you over these past several years. And it's my my intention that when we get out of this format, if we could coerce you to come back to a council meeting, that we could really acknowledge you formally in a way that others have been, and recognize those things. And I think for Mary as well, she's not here tonight, and she isn't usually at council meetings, but she's another person that's really given her all to very important aspects that make this city a very rich cultural place, and has benefited our city immensely. So we don't want to just say bye-bye to people like that. We'd really like to have a more formal time. And I do believe we're going to get there one of these days where we can meet in public. But I'll open up the floor for anyone else. Mr. Banks.
Ms. Young, as a member of the freshman class who has asked you a lot of very basic questions over the past few months, and had you be very patient with me, I have to thank you for bringing me and all of us along, because, you know, to use a COVID term, you've helped flatten the learning curve quite a bit. So, and that's really meaningful. I mean, that's something you can really take with you as you go on, that legacy continues, you know, and all that you've taught the people around you. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thanks.
Mrs. Katz.
Stephanie, what I loved about you is that every time you've come and presented something, you were cool, calm, and collected. You presented it in language at times that we could all understand, because sometimes what you present to us can be very complicated because of all the grants and everything that is involved. Going to miss you tremendously. Going to miss your presence, because like I said, it's been a very calming presence. And as Randy said, please come back so we can acknowledge you in person, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Randy, if I might say something?
Absolutely.
I'd go one better. Not only should we acknowledge Stephanie and Mary in an actual in-person council meeting, I really think that when this whole thing's over, we should have a party. And awesome. I'd be happy to try and put that together. It's one of my favorite things. But
if you bring a cake,
pardon me?
If you bring a cake, that you made.
If I bring a cake, it's a party already, Stephanie?
No, I want a cake that you make personally.
Stephanie, I only do cakes that I make personally. We'll do it. If I make a cake, will you come?
Yes.
Okay. Then that's all we need to know. Okay. You're on whenever COVID's over here. Yes. Okay, but no, Stephanie, you and Mary. I mean, Randy's right. We've lost a lot of really remarkable people in the city, but we will over the last couple of years. But we will particularly miss both of you. You know, Mary has really held together the historic kind of arm of city government, and I frankly don't know what we will do when she departs. And you have held together community development. I mean, you're like the rock over there, Stephanie. When John Grado was off gallivanting around and working on all sorts of stuff in the city, you made sure that we were dotting our I's and crossing our T's down there. And we really can't say enough how important someone who makes certain that we're taken care of is, and how much we appreciate that. And how afraid we are that we may flounder for a while without you, but we love you, and we have really enjoyed working with you I've really enjoyed working with you these last 11 years, and the city has been fortunate to benefit from your expertise and your commitment to the city ever since you were hired. And to benefit from your fathers before that.
Yes.
The Hipple family has done a lot for the city of Williamsport, and don't think we're not grateful. Thank you very much.
She did promise she's only a phone call away, though.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words. It's a little bit overwhelming, and I've really enjoyed working with all of you. And I know you all have the city's best interests at heart. And yeah, I'm just a phone call away. So thank you. Thanks very much. It means a lot.
I hear the baby's putting her 2 cents in too.
Yeah, but I was just about to say something else, and then I said I was going to put myself on mute instead.
Well, there's no easy way to end the goodbye, but till we meet again, shall we say that?
Absolutely.
Happy trails to you.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on to item 7. And a resolution with the Department of Justice coronavirus relief. Would you read that in short form, please, Mrs. Frank?
Yes, resolution, Department of Justice, coronavirus relief for the city of Williamsport.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there a motion in a second?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion in a second. Was this reviewed in finance?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it all was, Randy.
Okay. You're right.
I got away easy this past Tuesday.
Hey, you still had to review it, Bonnie. You just didn't have to share it.
I know, but you've got to do the talking, Liz.
Would somebody care to brief us on it?
Sure. So,
I don't know.
Really, yes.
So before you, members of council, is a resolution to accept a grant award in the amount of $33,425 from the Department of Justice for coronavirus relief. This grant will be open over a 2-year time frame to help offset costs of personal protective equipment used by city employees and any overtime associated with employees being off sick and other associated expenditures. Mr. Pavlak and I have been working since the beginning of the pandemic with the other city department heads to track expenses related to COVID-19. We currently have our list in place, and we're continuing to incur expenses on a relatively recent or regular basis. So this grant will be drawn down as needed, again, as I stated, over the course of 2 years for those funding streams.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Mealy?
This was reviewed by finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. Most of our discussions centered around whether or not this would likely be an adequate amount of money to deal with our PPE needs and overtime needs related to COVID. And Chief Killian said that it looked like it would be more than enough. And also that the reporting / reimbursement requirements are not particularly onerous. We don't need to submit receipts within a certain time frame, anything like that would really make it a pain for a small amount of money. So we are grateful to have received this funding and hopeful to receive other funding to help offset the impacts of COVID as well.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there, Mrs. Katz?
Yes, I think Chief Killian, to acknowledge some of the businesses that did give us some hand sanitizers, and I don't know what else, but to be grateful to them that they stepped forward to help the city out.
Yeah, absolutely, Ms. Katz. Specifically, Lonza. Lonza donated some concentrated hand sanitizer to the city and to some other volunteer departments around the city. I should note that we were pretty fortunate that we had a significant cache of PPE in place prior to the pandemic. So we didn't have we didn't have a large expenditures on PPE initially. Our expenses now are generally related to maintaining a cache of masks, gloves for specifically our public safety personnel, but also our folks that are working, in City Hall and such. And we do have, we will have some ongoing expenses with overtime, as when we have a couple of public safety members in quarantine right now. So as overtime is incurred, those will be added to the grant. So to Ms. Mealy's point, we believe this funding will be more than adequate for PPE, but we do still have 2 additional grants that are outstanding that we're waiting to hear back on for additional, additional coronavirus relief funding.
Thank you, Chief. Other questions or comments from council members? Hearing none, we'll have the vote. Mrs. Frank, on the motion, please.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to, and thank you, Chief Killian, for pursuing this, and really appreciate all the work that you and Joe have done to document the expenses so that we could qualify for these things. Job well done, gentlemen. Item 8 is accept for filing our list of minutes, Finance Committee minutes of May 12th, 2020 and June 23rd, 2020. Public Safety minutes of May 12th, 2020 and June 23rd, 2020. Veterans Memorial Park, January 6th, 2020. Codes report for March, May, and June 2020. Financial reports for the second quarter. And that's that list. Is there a motion and a second?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions on any of those filings? Hearing none, we'll have the vote. Mrs. Frank, please.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
I'll say yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to announcements. We will have a police pension board meeting immediately following our city council meeting. And that's going to be public as well. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held Thursday, August 6th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. I also want to announce, following our pension board meeting, we're going to have an executive session to discuss contract negotiations, mediation, and personnel items. Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, July 28th at 11 a.m., Historic Preservation. Wednesday, July 29th, that should be 7 p.m., Citizens Court. Friday, July 31st at 11 a.m., ERC. At noon, Housing Needs. Tuesday, August 4th at 11:30 a.m., Public Safety. At 1 p.m., Finance. And at 2:30 p.m., Public Works. And then our city council meeting next week. Are there any comments from council members tonight? Hearing or seeing none. Are there any comments from the administration tonight? I don't hear any there either, so we'll move to comments from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. We have a number of public comments. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll start with this one's from Jody Bainey, President Council Allison. July 26th, 2020 marks the 30th year anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the city of Williamsport is not accessible to residents. Think about that statement and ask yourself how you would feel tomorrow if you suddenly developed a disability and didn't have access to your own city. That's what it is like for 4,667 residents of the city of Williamsport. The city of Williamsport for decades has knowingly disregarded its obligations under federal accessibility laws requiring access to a safe, unencumbered path of travel into and throughout its city hall building. The city of Williamsport has intentionally discriminated against residents and acted with deliberate indifference to their rights under Section 504 and the ADA. The city has for many years known that a federally protected right is substantially likely to be violated and failed to act despite that knowledge. The city has made deliberate choices. The failures here are not the result of negligence, oversight, or bureaucratic inaction. The city's approach has been to delay, dodge, deflect, and defer. Don't forget, most of all of these repairs are only 0.476% of the city's current 5-year capital budget. Do what's right for all residents for Williamsport. City Hall for all. How will you be celebrating the anniversary still in violation? The next comment is from Misty Dion, President Council Allison. The passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act was a watershed event in the history of disability rights. In the weeks leading up to its passage, members of ADAPT used the power of our collective strength and organizing to help push it across the finish line. ADAPT acted out the injustices facing disabled people by crawling up the stairs to that Capitol building. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, it was meant to make our communities inclusive of all people. We expected the ADA to make accessibility available in all kinds of buildings. We expected the ADA to encourage service providers to make their programs open for all people. We expected the ADA to enable us to move freely in our communities. We expected the ADA to clear a path so that we could work, play, and live with non-disabled neighbors, friends, and family members. Since the signing of the ADA 30 years ago, the law has helped many people get jobs, move around in our communities, go to stores and use services, communicate, and participate in community life. On this 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, join us by committing in word and actions to providing safe and accessible access to City Hall for the 4,667 citizens of Williamsport with disabilities who do not have access today. After all, the elevator and access ramp cost less than 0.5% of your capital budget. NCPA ADAPT demands City Hall for all. The next comment is from Karen Koch, President of Council. The City of Williamsport has accepted federal resources for longer than the ADA has been a law. Administration after administration, nothing was done to create a 504 compliance plan. This plan required showing how each year a project would be completed that would lead to a compliant, safe, accessible City Hall. Wow, that sounds like a reasonable expectation of the federal government, not for the city of Williamsport. The city of Williamsport continued to put its hand out for federal resources while ignoring the need to comply with federal laws. 47 years after the Rehabilitation Act, 30 years after the passage of the ADA, you do realize we're not talking about the dental people. You need to spend less than 0.5% of your capital budget to provide access to City Hall. Instead, you opt to waste more money on legal fees. Disabilities don't discriminate. Any one of you could join the club at any time. If you're in the city of Williamsport, say goodbye to your civil rights. The next comment is from Tima Cummings, President Council Allison. I am a resident of the city, a taxpayer, and a person who uses a wheelchair. I do not have the same access to City Hall as those without physical challenges. I was promised proper access for several years. With the ADA reaching its 30th anniversary, I believe that's more than enough to comply with ADA. I don't understand the holdup and delay. I was told I would have the honors of cutting the ribbon at the reveal of the ramp ceremony. This has not taken place. Please do your part to make sure you stay true to your promise and obey the ADA. Next comment is from Bruce Huffman, President Allison and City Council members. I understand that since the beginning of the year, the following important city positions have been publicly advertised and posted with job descriptions. fire chief, city engineer, recreation coordinator, and director of community and economic development. I further understand that 3 of these positions went through a formal interview process prior to a candidate being selected. I believe the C and ED director position has not yet reached that stage. I am perplexed as to why the same advertising, posting, and interview process was not done for the Bureau of Transportation / RVT general manager position. The next comment is from Regina Wright. The 30th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act is July 26, 2020. What does this mean for the citizens of Williamsport? A lack of access to their city, segregated entrances, and feeling of neglect. This is the truth for 4,667 residents of the city of Williamsport. You are only one accident, one medical emergency, one weather disaster away from joining those citizens. City of Williamsport has knowingly disregarded its obligations under federal accessibility laws like the Rehab Act of '73 and the ADA, requiring access to a safe, unencumbered path of travel into and throughout its City Hall building. The City of Williamsport has intentionally discriminated against residents and acted with deliberate indifference to their rights under Section 504 and the ADA. The City of Williamsport continues to delay any progress in making the proper motions to correct this injustice. Keep in mind, most of all these repairs are only 0.476% of the city's current 5-year capital budget. Do what's right for all residents of Williamsport. Disabled citizens are still citizens. We vote for you. We pay your taxes. We are part of your economy and a big part of our city. City has for many years known that a federally protected right is substantially likely to be violated and failed to act despite that knowledge. The city has made deliberate choices. It's time to correct this pressing issue and do right by your constituents. It's time to make City Hall accessible for all. And then the last comment is from Shaylin Sluzalis. President Council Allison, the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA was a watershed event in the history of disability rights. In the weeks leading up to its passage, members of ADAPT used the power of our collective strength in organizing to help push it across the finish line. ADAPT acted out the injustice facing disabled people by crawling up the stairs to the Capitol building. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, it was meant to make our communities inclusive of all people. We expected the ADA to make accessibility available in all kinds of buildings. We expect the ADA to encourage service providers to make their programs open for all people. We expected the ADA to enable us to move freely in our communities. We expected the ADA to clear a path so we could work, play, and live with non-disabled neighbors, friends, and family members. Since the signing of the ADA 30 years ago, the laws helped many people get jobs, move around in our communities, go to stores and use services, communicate, and participate in community life. On this 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, join us by committing in word and actions to provide safe and accessible access to City Hall for the 4,667 citizens of Williamsport with disabilities who do not have access today. After all, the elevator and access ramp cost less than 0.5% of your capital budget. NCPA to ADAPT demands City Hall for all. And that is the end of the public comments that were received.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned from our regular meeting and we will enter into our next meeting. I call to order the meeting of the Police Pension Board. It's Thursday evening, 7:58, and we're meeting remotely by Zoom. We're going to move right to item 1, approval of the minutes dated January 23rd, 2020. Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Discussion on those minutes. Hearing none. Mrs. Frank, on item 1, please.
Mr. Yoder,
yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sharaj,
I think he stepped away.
Okay. I didn't even.
I'm sorry. Was it me?
There he is.
Hey, yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't see you had left. We motioned in second on the minutes, so Would you like to vote? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Steve.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
I apologize.
that's fine.
Yes on the minutes.
Okay,
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
yes. Motion passes 8-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to item 2, pension contribution, Donald Mays. Is there a motion and a second on this?
So move.
Second, and I have a couple questions.
Okay, the floor is open.
Under the bottom where the benefit calculations are listed, it has a maximum future benefit, 35% COLA. It's my understanding there is a recent arbitration decision. My question would be, and I don't know if Joe's on from finance, whether the numbers here reflect the recent arbitration award by the FOP.
My comment to that would be this calculation was prepared prior to if the retirement date here was 2019 during our biennial audit. It was determined that this one never came before the pension board, so we're bringing it now. That line, and I don't know if we need to make a motion to remove it, but I would make a recommendation that under the benefit calculation, line 5 be removed. And then that would comply with, and the other two calculations, it'd be consistent with the other two calculations.
And thank you, Joe. That I appreciate that. That was my second question, was regarding the other two calculations, that there was no future maximum benefit.
It was just a timing issue with that, Steve. So it again, and just for clarification, the agenda has this as pension contributions. This is actually voting on a regular retirement pension, which will be effective April 22nd, 2021, when the retiree hits age 50.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure that the numbers were correct regarding his future calculation. If they have to be adjusted, I think you're right. It's appropriate that we would remove those lines from the calculation.
Okay, so we need a motion to amend so that we can remove those.
I believe so.
Okay.
I'd move that we remove the number 5, the maximum future benefit, because the calculations aren't actually correct.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion from council members or any other discussion. Okay, hearing none on the motion to amend and remove line 5.
Mr. Yoder, Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sharaj,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 7-8. So we've amended. Now we can go back to our original motion. Any more discussion on that? On the retirement pension? Hearing none on the original motion, please, Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sharaj,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 8-0. Let's move to item 3. Pension drop plan, Damon Hagan. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion on this. Hearing and seeing none. We'll have the vote on this as well. Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sharaj,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, motion passes 8-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to item 4, pension drop plan. Deborah Wasilowski. Is there a motion and a second on that?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll have the vote, please, Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sharaj,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes, that motion passes 8-0 as well. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move to 5. Any related items tonight? From anyone? Mr. Siraj, any?
No, are we looking at having a quarterly meeting anytime soon, or will that be by Zoom or quarterly report? I know the market's been kind of a roller coaster ride here the last several months, but I think it's beneficial to determine where the market's at is regarding our pension fund.
Yeah.
Do you want to take
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. Yes.
Wells Fargo, Deb Schneider and Bill Warbeck reached out when the typical first report would be coming through in April, and due to everything that was going on, we determined that we'd hold off at the first quarter. The expectation is that the next quarterly review would be done in August. And the plan is to review the first and second quarters at that point. The form of the meeting, I don't think is yet to be identified, but we want to get updated sooner than later. So we believe that we'll have some form in August.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Other questions or comments tonight? Hearing none, now entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much. Sorry to hold you up.
No
It's sitting
problem.
next to you, Steve.